So the question is, what is the difference between um, what is seen in the world of religious institutions getting so much funding and support, um, between one religion and the other, across cultures, that is. And the whole premise of being generous, where could that fit in? By the way, when I am mentioning religious institutions, that could easily be proxy for be used as a replacement or placeholder for political institutions or financial institutions, or where people have strong faith, where people look for as their piggy bank of resources. Those resources could be invisible. Those resources could actually have zeros and ones attached to them, digits, and essentially giving you a sense of quote-unquote safety, a security blanket, if you will. Well, there isn't a difference in across cultures. First, let me address it like that, because so whether a person is a Buddhist person, lay person, going and making donations at a temple, at a monastery, at a center, versus somebody in America or anywhere in the world going and making donations, or even doing so, like televangelists, where they have these huge buildings constructed, which they call churches, where they have them packed with people who come in from around the world sometimes to see this very famous evangelist or a religious person, or somebody who's got books written, who's got a major following, famous person. This has been going on forever in human culture. No matter which side of the planet you're coming from or you're looking at, in our history as a species, you see this everywhere, where the human mind, the human brain actually goes and looks for the bigger temple to donate to, because you will feel more secure in your piggy bank, in your security blanket. Otherwise, why are those other people are doing it? So obviously they know something that I don't. So let me go there. So this even takes us to the realm of physics and you can call it natural physical laws of people or beings huddling together where there's bigger noise. You see this in flocks of birds. When pigeons or doves fly, or any type of bird that flies in a flock, the one with the bigger flock will always be attractive for those solo or one or two birds flying on their own, like in a smaller, much smaller group, guess where that smaller group are going to go? They're going to go all the way to the bigger one. In biology and physics, there's this thing called emergence, where you will find, initially when they were looking at this phenomena in nature, you had these amoebas, single-celled organisms. They didn't know it was single-celled, by the way. It looked like it was a single organism moving together. And then they looked very closely and they saw that it's not a single organism. It looks like, it appears like it is a single organism, but it is not. It is made out of countless other single-celled organisms joined in. People love to join in. They feel stronger in numbers. But when that single-cell amoeba is coming in, when that single bird flying in the blue, wide open spaces in the sky comes and joins the bigger flock of birds, it must give up something. It gives up the vast, limitless, open sky for itself and goes and squeezes itself into a tight little spot in the flock. But it gives it the illusion that it is doing the right thing. It gives it the illusion that it is on the right path, that it is now finally secure. I see this as a Buddhist monk. I have seen this in Asia a lot, but not just in Asia. As I was mentioning, you see this in so-called Christian or evangelical institutions in America and other places. So this is not something that is found within one religious group per se over the other. No, not at all. But I would see how students who have finally seen the Dhamma, finally seen something, you've touched something deep in them, something that had been untouched. And they would come listen to the Dhamma talks, they would come attend retreats, they would even develop in their practice beautifully. But then, guess what? They fall back. They go back and join what has always come, what they think, naturally to them. But they're just joining in. They're just doing things on automatic pilot. And you have a lot of people on automatic pilot, not just in Asia today, but around the world, everywhere. It gives you the fake confidence. You see this in other human activities as well, especially in sports, where people gather in entire stadiums, thousands of them. But because the mind is functioning on the basis of duality, there's a me, that means there's another. There's a you. There's this and then there's that. And that will create what? The two sides, the two banks of the river. So now you have something to engage in. So now you have an activity. Now you can continue the restlessness in your heart. You can actually continue. Now you can even legitimize it. You can legitimize your inner discomfort, your deep sense of ennui and dissatisfaction with life, with who you are as a person, pointing the finger at this or that. Now the pointing at the finger goes to the opposite side of the stadium, where you have the opposing team's fans who are equally cheering, but they're not cheering, for your team. They're cheering for theirs. It's like those single-celled organisms. Now they have their own little thing going on the other side. You have yours, they have theirs. Just like now there's two huge flocks of birds. It's a waste of time. It never serves as a security blanket in the long run. It will relinquish you of the responsibility to be yourself, for sure. It will legitimize your inhumanity. That's what the Nazis were doing. That's why a few years ago people were pointing fingers at individuals who were saying, well, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. You go ahead and decide on doing this and that measure, but leave me alone. I'm protecting myself, but I don't have to go overboard crazy just trying to please you. Well, guess what? The majority of public did to those people. Ostracized them. They still do. Well, not as much, but they were doing it. Families have been completely torn apart. Because you have the population of the planet suddenly joining in to the bigger flock. With the bigger flock. And even if that meant saying, or turning your back on people you've known, people you've cared about, or people that you grew up with, etc., it didn't mean much, because now you have a bigger group. And this is called greed of the deepest and most ugliest sense. And this is something that I see within, as a Buddhist monk, as a bhikkhu, within the Buddhist community. I've seen this in different countries, in Thailand, Sri Lanka, the US, Malaysia, where else? Everywhere I've been. No country is immune because it's not the country's fault. It is the fault of the lay people who are not doing their job to live their own life with responsibility, and then also join in, and then, be part of a group. This is not about just, individuality at the cost of, working together. Not at all. But people have stopped thinking for themselves. Everybody wants to be in a group. Everybody wants to be part of a group. The wisest people among, that came out of humanity, the smartest, geniuses, were not part of groups. They were solo thinkers. They worked on their own. They worked to solve problems. The group will never solve a problem, It will go, chop, destroy, and ask questions later. Again, look at the Nazis. Look at the different regimes in the world. Destructive regimes. Communism. Capitalism. Postmodern capitalism that doesn't care. Everybody's now hailing for AI or the FDA, they say, has approved Elon Musk's putting of a chip inside of a brain, a human being's brain. People are not getting up to actually say, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you having my child be exposed to these despicable, unethical, immoral, spineless, cowardly, inhumane things in the name of so-called education that you deem education, you who are lacking a moral backbone. People are not marching on the streets talking to let the rest of the population know we don't agree with this. So integrity does not come by joining a bigger group. For some reason, though, this has become the bad. This has become the new infestation within humanity. I was referring to the lay Buddhists, who go ahead and fund and continue to provide for opulent lifestyle of certain monasteries and monks. And then they come to me asking me for meditation advice, asking me, this solo functioning, one monk operation bhikkhu that I've been addressed as, and people have, I don't mind, by the way, being addressed in that way or described. But people would come after being supportive of certain abbots or certain monasteries that they know doesn't have Dhamma, does not contain the teachings of Lord Buddha, given the lifestyle of the monks. The monks don't practice what they teach. They don't practice the Dhamma, period. But they go ahead and support these institutions. And then they say, well, what can I do? It's a thing. It's a family thing. It's a thing. Well, I was just describing this to a student. Imagine you have a poison ivy or a plant that is poisonous. You do have that kind of plants in nature. But let's say you discover, let's say somebody comes and points out, and a botanist comes and tells you, hey, your garden is beautiful, but look at this. In this side of the garden, in which you are every day going and putting in necessary, water and this and that, and nutrition and fertilizer, this and that. That part of the garden or the pot itself is full of those poisonous plants. And you go ahead and shrug your shoulders and say, hey, what can I do? It's And then someone comes or your child comes, rubs against that poison ivy or eats that poisonous plant and gets sick, or you yourself. What is your responsibility? You cannot join that big church, big temple and say, well, I'm putting my money where the bigger money is, where the majority's investments are. This is stupid. So this goes beyond the confines of religion, politics. This has to do with our infantile way of thinking as human beings. This is beyond cultures, beyond religions, beyond political views. Because it's so easy to create fronts, to create this side versus that. All you have to do is gather some people together and say, why don't you put your ideologies aside and just join in with just one? Just be together. Well, you're doing it here, but there's over there, a mile away, a kilometer away, there's another group that's doing the same thing, which doesn't agree with your ideology. Well, now we just got ourselves an enemy. And they also have us as their enemy. So this is what's going on. And meanwhile, in the silence, in the total silence, what's happening is your life is going by. It's like the river, that's the stream that is running under your feet. You're not even aware. You're totally oblivious. Your time is passing by. You're getting older. Things are changing. And you're holding on to these things. And that's why people keep going on to these places and keep hoping to get something. Something that will not feed their heart, that will not give them true tranquility, that will not give them joy. It's like an emotional outburst. Feeling high in some churches, in some places, in some cultures. You have people who gather, there's drums and singing and this and that, and it's a religious event for them. And then you have all this emotional high, there's a lot of movement, dancing, this and that, and then what happens after all that emotion? It's almost like, there's a release. There's a release of intense pent-up energy, after which the person says, oh, I feel blissed out. There's nothing spiritual about that. It's like sexuality. Pent-up energy, you release it. It's like anger, pent-up energy. You release it, and all of a sudden, and then what happens? You start building again. That's the natural process. It's on automatic pilot. But it doesn't have to be. So long as you're not following the flock of birds, instead of flying on your own, to think and to be responsible for your life. So this probably is the most intense time for human beings to be encountering cowardice on such an intense, saturated levels, where people are afraid to talk, to express the truth of what they really feel like. Instead, they just want to follow the herd, follow the school of fish, follow the flock of birds, follow the herd. And to find some type of an identity, just like those millions of amoeba cells together, joining up because they wanted some type of security. There's a difference between a human being and an amoeba, right? We don't have to live like amoebas. But that's what we're doing. Because when you decide, like I was saying earlier, when you decide to leave the huge, open, limitless sky, blue sky, and you come and squeeze yourself into this group of other thinkers, so that your scrutinizing effort become less, so you can take the passenger seat. Because ultimately that's what you're doing when you're going and supporting a bigger temple that that doesn't give you anything, any happiness deep down, answers to questions that you've always had, but you nevertheless do it. When you don't practice, you look for comfort in the crowd, then you're going back to being an amoeba. Because you've relinquished your side, the limitless sky, and you went back. Until what happens? Until it gets to a boiling point where you realize the stupidity of it, at least temporarily, and then you say, no, there's no happiness that comes from that. I need to go back and figure things out on my own. Well, now you're going back between the two extremes of the pendulum. Again, the pent-up energy. But once you find yourself a nice balance, it doesn't stay like that. You look over and you see that thousands of people in the nosebleeds and all the, in the stadium, and you're like, yeah, I wonder what's going on there. Let me go join them, because that's what they are doing. And let me be part of they. Let me be part of them. Let me be part of the bigger group. What's wrong with you? Whose legs are you standing on? Whose lungs are you breathing through? Whose eyes are you viewing the world through or with? Whose eyes? Whose brain are you using to think with? Whose heart? Whose heart is it that is beating in your chest? If people are honest, 100% honest, many of them will not be able to answer. if they're being 100% honest. So when you're breathing, let it be that it's your set of lungs you're breathing through. Let it be your heart that is beating in your chest. Don't be afraid. You don't have to go and support this big temple so that you feel cozy and good because you keep putting it's my parents, it's my mother, it's my grandmother, it's my dad or my uncle, whatever. No. Own up your life. Enough. This childish, amoeba-like existence of yours. Own up. And stop living like a coward.